Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Today we are going to talk about the management environment. The management environment, when we talk about, we are talking about the environment inside the organization and outside the organization. The environment outside the organization is the factors or events or the forces which affect the organization directly or indirectly, and there is an internal environment in the organization which we call it organizational culture, which also has its own forces, pressures, etc. So we are going to discuss this, the management environment. In this slides, the following slides, we are going to cover, explain what the external environment is and why it's important, discuss how the external environment affects managers, define what organizational culture is and why it's important. And when I said organizational culture, it means basically its internal environment, and describe how organizational culture affects the managers. So explain what the external environment is and why it's important. Let's see the definition. What is external environment? If there are factors, forces, situations and events outside the organization that affects its performance, which are not in the control of management. Under the control of management, it is outside the organization which are putting pressure directly, direct forces are there, or indirectly affecting the organization. For example, in year 2010, in Iceland there was volcanic eruption, and this volcanic eruption disrupted the flights, European flights. And what happened was that there was a BMW plant in South Carolina and in Japan, Nissan facilities, both were shut down because they couldn't get the auto parts on time. So you can see that there are forces and situations and events outside the organization that affects its performance. And we will see in detail what these could be. Well, we have several components here which affects the organizations. Economic is there, global is there, political and legal, socio-cultural, technological and demographics. We start with economic. The economic is a very important factor or force which directly affects the organization. If the economy, and when we talk of economic, it means economy of the country, it means the situation of the debt, the situation of interest rates, unemployment, inflation, all this, and the economy is composed of, the organizations are affected if the economy of the country is going well. If the economy is booming, the organization will be affected positively, and if the economy is doing bad, then of course the economy, if the organizations will be affected badly. A few years back, I was in Nissan showroom, and the oil prices have been down, and in Oman the oil prices, if go down, we know that, and the economy goes down. And I was talking to that gentleman there, the manager, and he said to me that the sales were 50% comparing to the previous year. So you can see that the economy has affected the sales of Nissan company here. We will discuss this in the coming slide of economic also further. Let's look at the global. The global economy also affects the organization. Globalization has many effects, as we talked about the volcanic eruption. Globally, things are now, there is a global competitor maybe, globalization has effects, global economy affects the local economies, and this has effect on the organizations in a positive way or in a negative way. Global oil markets also affects. For example, the poor countries, if the oil prices go up, that affects them badly. The developing countries who do not have their own oil production, whereas the countries which are oil-based economies like Oman, if the oil prices goes down, that affects them badly. The political and legal, the laws of the country, the federal laws, the local laws, etc., the states laws, they affect the organization in either in a positive way or in a negative way, depending on what type of law is. For example, in Oman, if we talk about let's say the law comes and says that Omanization should be 80%. In Oman, they want that 80% in the organizations should be Omanis. Now, if they are presently only 50% Omanis are working, and they have to increase from 50% to 80%, it means that these laws will affect the organization in a very, perhaps in a negative way, because the organization is relying on force, the labor force, which is mainly coming from India, Bangladesh, Pakistan, etc., which are cheaper, and also they are perhaps more qualified, which Omani nationals may not be qualified to take over the jobs right away. So they might have to hire them and train them. So these kind of laws, they can affect the organizations in a positive way or in a negative way, depending on. Similarly, a law comes, we have a minimum wage salaries for Omanis is 350 riyals, and the organization have to pay at least 350 riyal per month. So these kind of laws, when passed, they affects the organizations. Similarly, political stability in the country also affects the organizations. So political and legal laws affects the organization in a positive way or in the negative way. Regarding socio-cultural, the socio-cultural is the trends of the society, and that affects the organization also. In 1980s, for example, Nike's started losing its market of shoes, and we know that Nike makes very nice performance shoes, but they were losing the market. When they studied, they saw that their competitors are making very trendy colors, and for example, men were wearing pink and orange colored shoes, and they saw that well, that's happening. What's happening? Because people were having these trendy shoes instead of performance shoes. So these social cultural things affects the organizations. Similarly, now awareness of we have the awareness of people are more conscious about weight. KFC, we know that KFC used to be Kentucky Fried Chicken, and now they have removed the word fried. In a way, they have not removed it. They have started calling them KFC instead of Kentucky Fried Chicken, because they are trying to see that the mood of people are not to eat fried things. So these trends, they affect the organizations. Technological things affects directly and indirectly. If a new technology comes and that is not taken into account, the organization do not take that new technology, use that technology, and their competitor use that technology, a new software, for example, or a new machine which can do the things quicker than the earlier machines, etc., then the organization, of course, will be affected with that. So technological advancements also affects the organizations. And then demographics. The demographics is the population characteristics, which includes the age of people, their sex, their how much income they make, what are their ages, etc. These are all demographics, and what kabila, for example, they are. These demographics census are collected in census also. When they take the census of the country, they see the composition of people, how many people are there, what are their ages in the household, what are their income, etc. So organizations are also actually looking for these. These are basically customers. They are looking for their customers, and these customers affects the organizations. So they look at what are the ages of people, what will be the future demands in the future, what kind of people they have, in their incomes are. For example, if they are making high-end products, they will see that if the people income is going down because of economy, of course, they will be affected by that. So these things, they look at that, the organizations. We will see these two further in the coming slides. So let's see how has the economy changed. There was a turmoil in mortgage markets, and we are talking about here in year 2008, 7 and 8, when there was turmoil in mortgage markets in United States. Mortgage is basically the loans which people take from the banks, and the banks use that house as an asset against which they give the loan. And what happened was that the banks started giving very easy loans. The people who couldn't qualify for those loans were also given those loans. These were also called subprime mortgages and so on. There was eventually these people who borrowed money were not able to give back their money, return the money, or give back their loans, couldn't pay their interest on that. So what happened was that there was a turmoil, and eventually there were foreclosures. Foreclosure means that when the bank see that the house owner cannot return the money, cannot give its installments back, then they ask the owners to leave the house. They take over the house and sell it to other people so that they can get their money back. But because foreclosures were there, banks couldn't get the appropriate market for that houses, and that affected the other businesses as well, because about 40 businesses were related to housing markets, and that spread to other businesses, and this then spread all over the world because the economy is interconnected. So eventually the economists called it a Great Recession, and because this Great Recession, there were unemployments, there was a public debt and social problems. The public debt happened because government interfered, and it took heavy loans again to boost the economy, to start some construction works and so on, and this had effects all in the economy. And there were social problems, of course. When there are unemployments, there were social problems as well. We can take the example of impact of international oil prices in Oman. As I talked about that when I was in, for example, in Nissan showroom, he said that because of the oil prices, which were not favorable in Oman, the sales were only 50%. So comparing to previous years. So the economy affects the organizations positively or negatively, depending on how the economy is going. Demographics. Demographic is another component in the environment which affects the organization. Demographics refers to the characteristic of a population used for purposes of social studies. It has a significant impact on how managers manage and include such factors as age, income, gender, race, education level, ethnic makeup, employment status, geographic location, and more. So this is all a characteristic of population. Basically, the organizations are looking at their future customers, who will be their customers, and how they can target their customers. And these customers, of course, their trends, their gender, their race, etc., affects the organizations that who are looking for their customers. Studying demographics involve looking at current statistics and future trends. For instance, recent analysis of birth rates shows that more than 80% of babies being born worldwide are from Africa and Asia. So which means that the future markets are Africa and Asia. And there is an aging population in China, and in year 2050 say that Chinese, more than 65 years old Chinese will be in greater population than the rest of the world above 65. So you
basically, if I wanted to have a technology that addresses the older people, so that is important to me to know how many people are aging in a country. If there is a technology that is easy to use by youth, then obviously the number of a young population will be important to us. There are cases where luxurious goods, for example, are targeted toward the people who have high income. So these are going to have an impact on the direction of the company if it wants to go into the development of items and technology.
Exactly. As you said that, for example, if there is an aging population in China, it means that maybe pharmaceutical companies or those companies which are making some products for aging populations, they will be looking for their targets in China where their market is. Similarly, if there are young babies are born, maybe then they might be looking for young mothers as potential customers, because young mothers may be needing baby products which are needed for their baby. So baby foods, baby shampoos, baby diapers, etc., whatever the baby's needs are, they will be looking for these things. So these companies, they look at these demographics, they see that where their future customers are, what are the future trends, etc. Thank you very much for the comments. The other factors we have already discussed. So there are global factors also, there are political and legal laws which can affect the organization, there are social and cultural trends which affects the organization, and technology also affects the organization besides demographics and economics. Now, how the internal environments affects the managers. How much difference does a manager make? Are they all powerful or they are helpless? So actually they are in between. They are neither very powerful, neither helpless. Some organizations which are the environment is not very dynamic, the external components are not changing, the managers are, we can say, are powerful. Where the external environment is dynamic, there are external components which are changing, and it's dynamic and complex, then of course these managers do not have much on that. So this is views depends on how you look at but they are neither fully powerful nor completely helpless. How does the external environment affect managers? They affect the jobs, employment. Okay, as we have seen that it's clearly we can see from there that it affects the jobs and employment. If there are not customers, because there are no, the economy is going bad, there will be unemployment also, and the jobs will be lost as well.
Or the people will buy less of the commodity or goods.
Yeah.
Because they don't have enough salary to buy it.
That's right. Amount of environmental uncertainty affects the managers. The more the uncertainty, of course, the more the managers find helpless. And then the nature of stakeholder relationships. If the stakeholders relationship is good, then they can have some leverage, and they know they can see that some uncertainty can be avoided if they have good relationship with their stakeholders. We will look at the stakeholders further. First of all, let's look at this what we call it matrix, or yeah. So we, on the left side, we have degree of complexity, and here we have degree of change. In cell 1 we have a stable, which means stability is there, degree of change is less, and it is simple, which means stable and predictable environment. Okay, few components in environment. When we say few components in environment, then it is simple. All right. When we have large number of components in the environment, we say it is complex. So components are somewhat similar in stable and simple environment. Components are somewhat similar and remain basically the same, minimal need for sophisticated knowledge of components. We can say that education industry, for example, Sultan Qaboos University, we have a stable environment, and the components in the environment are simple. We are not having a very new competitors coming. Even if new competitor come, he will take few years to make its reputation comparable to Sultan Qaboos University, etc. So we can see that it's a stable and predictable environment in university. But if we look at, for example, the mobile industry, where we have a dynamic and unpredictable environment. There are many components in environment, there are many competitors, many suppliers, many components in environment are there, and components are not similar to one another and are continually changing. So high need for sophisticated knowledge of components. So there is, as you can see over here, cell number 4, it is amount of uncertainty is a lot there. And when there is a lot of uncertainty, planning becomes also difficult. Whereas if we have a simple and stable environment, planning, controlling, all these functions are easy to carry out. These are in between, the other two cells are in between. There are dynamic and simple environment, and this is cell number 3, stable and predictable environment, many components environment. Components are not similar to one another and remain basically the same. Knowledge of components. So you can see that. Okay, now we come to managing stakeholder relationships. Stakeholders who are stakeholders? These are any constituencies in an organization's environment that are affected by that organization decision and